you do that? How did you do that?
Welcome back everyone to another episode of How to Get Good. Now today we're going to go into damage types. So we've gone into light attacks, heavy attacks, CC, all that kind of stuff. We've gone into skills, where to get them, what they do, and how to plan which skills you should and shouldn't get and what they do. Especially passives. Passives are very important. But what do we now do as far as damage types are concerned? What should you be focusing on? How is it affecting the target you're up against or yourself? And what's the difference in the damage types, especially when it comes to applying them and how they affect your setups and other skills as well. Now, there are lots of conditions in the game where it requires a certain type of damage, or where you may prefer a certain type of damage based on a situation. You might prefer damage over time as your particular setup. You might prefer direct damage. You might prefer area of effect. You might need a combination of them. There's lots of different types in the game. Now we're going to go over the difference. Now, this is very relevant for those of you that are trying to put together builds as well, because like I said, there are some sets that have requirements to certain types. So we're going to go over these on the Necromancer specifically. These aren't necessarily saying you must pick a Necromancer. That's not what I'm trying to do. I'm using this as a demonstration. You've got lots of different classes in the game, lots of different skills, and they all do have their own rules, but I'm going to show you how to look for them. Now, this Blast Bones, for example. Fire it up, let him go, and he hits the target when he feels like it. Now, that is explained in the skill, but that's direct damage. It hits the target directly. As you can see here, it explodes, dealing disease damage to all enemies nearby. Now, that's very different, because although you saw the direct attack, it wasn't something that was attached to the target and lingering. It just goes bang. Hello. Glad they're fixing that on PTS. There you go. He decides to blow up eventually. That's a direct hit. And also, so is this. And so is this. These are all direct hits. But this particular skill is not only direct damage, it's not direct single target, it's direct area of effect. Now, for those of you that are relatively new, if you don't know what that means, just to put it into simple terms, there's a target there, there's a target here. Now, you saw it hit one target. Now, with it being area of effect, of course, it will hit them all. So if we cast a skeleton again, instead of hitting just the main target, it should hit all surrounding targets that are in range. Now, if they're not quite in range, that won't happen, of course, because there is a limitation. Now, what you're looking for in this to know how far the distance is, or how far the area of effect radius is it's from the radius of the target, of course. So the skeleton, this around that skeleton is 6 meters around it. So it's actually 12 meters across. It's pretty big if you're going from the diameter kind of perspective. However, this has a 28 meter range. So this is confusing to people. The range is how far you can cast it. The radius is the size of the area of effect. So, what we'll do here is we'll move this guy across a bit. And we'll move him across a little bit. We'll hit him. That'll probably reach him. And it still hits him. See, it's massive. It's a really big range. Now, the radius is not, oh, it's 6 meters here. It's 6 meters from the target. So, imagine this is the skeleton. It's 6 meters this way, 6 meters this way, from the center. So if you did your math in school, you should know how to figure out the difference between the radius and the diameter. The radius from the center of either the being that is casted or the person that is casting it. So, here's another example for you. This is a 6 meter radius. This is Whirling Blades, by the way. Now this spins me around in a circle. And enemies within 6 meters of me. So, from where I'm standing, these will all get hit. Because it's 12 meters across, but 6 meters either side. I know some of you may go, oh, this is really obvious. It's not obvious to everyone. So, again, that is actually direct damage as well. So, you've got direct area of effect. You've got another direct area of effect. And then this one as well is direct area of effect. You can hit them all. It's massive. But pay attention to the distances. So this one's actually larger, but this one's a cone effect. So this is a straightforward, you can cast it from range area of effect. This is a close range to you area of effect. As you can see, target area. And this is a cone. So these are 3 very different AoEs. Again, this one is distance from where you can cast it, and the radius is set to the skeleton. This one, the radius is set to target area, which is around you, and this one is cone, which is in front of you. So although this is 7 meters, this is not 7 meters across. This is 7 meters in a cone in front of you. If I aim it behind me, it's not hitting anything. Aim it there, it's probably going to catch him. There will probably catch him. The cone's pretty big, but it's the front. Now, since we're on damage type still, yes, each one of these is direct damage. However, what happens if you have an area of effect damage over time? So damage over time is different. Damage over time, instead of instantly hitting and just doing damage for being fired, stays on the target or in the target area and does damage every tick. Sometimes those ticks can be half a second, sometimes 1 second, sometimes 2. They vary. Now, this particular skill has a range, but with a difference. So we'll use a skeleton to blow up because we need a corpse. Now, I can cast it from over here, but it's going to do the area of effect there. But I can get him too. Now, it's a 5 meter radius from where this is cast, but because the beam is on me, anyone that gets in the way of it is also added to it. And as you can see, there's tick damage doing damage, as it says in here, over time. Now, it does explode at the end. What is that? The explosion is not damage over time, is it? The explosion is direct damage, again in area of effect, not single target. So, this gets even more confusing. It does area of effect damage, which is beneficial to some weapon passives, especially if you use a lightning staff, for example. Not necessarily for this particular skill. This is a stamina morph, so you may not want to do that, but that would contribute to the increase of damage. You've got damage over time, which can be affected via sets or champion points, which we'll get to in another video. And then you've got range on it as well. That adds additional damage over time over here. It gets nuts. That's a very confusing skill. That's why the Necromancer is slightly advanced, by the way. We're not doing a Necromancer video per se, but we're showing you some of the more complex skills so you can pay more attention to what they do and how they're applied. Sure, if you've got a Necromancer and you just spam abilities and do cool stuff, they're great. But if you understand the damage types, that's when you can kind of capitalize on certain areas. Again, 5 meter radius from the cast, but has a range and more people can be introduced to the damage. It's actually a lot faster than a second. That's every half a second. It's really, really quick. And then, boom, at the end. So, what did we learn from this skill? It is damage over time, is area of effect, and it's direct. And the area is based on the radius of the cast, regardless of how far away you are, up to 28 meters. So just to recap over these types of damages, there are obviously direct, there's area of effect, and there's damage over time as well. But this has a range. The radius is the size of the explosion or the size of the damage from the enemy. So wherever the target is going to. So if it says target enemy, it's wherever this ability is going to. When it says target, it doesn't say anything, and it just says radius, that's going to be from where you cast it. So where the ability goes off. So, for example, we'll use another skeleton. I have a range, but it's from where the ability explodes. Wakey, wakey. Come on. There you go. Now, it's from there. So wherever that lands, an I cast is where it's going to activate. Then, area, target area, means around the caster, so you. And cone is in front of you. Now, when we look at stuff like ultimates, we're going to go more into these later, but you can see here that this hits 3 times. Now, this does look like it's damage over time, and technically it is, because it's over a duration. However, it is 3 individual hits, which are very different from each other. And area of effect as well. As you can see here, target ground, that means wherever you place it. So, if we put... Have we got enough ultimate? Not quite. This is ground. Anything that has this. That means if I cast it over there, or over here, or over there, down the stairs, whatever, I have a limited range, based on the rules, but ground means wherever I put it. Now look very carefully. You'll see the hits land. 1, 2, 3. They're all direct damage. Each one above their head, you saw the insta slaps. They weren't damage over time like these types of abilities here, which you can see on the target ticking over doing damage. As you can see there, that is tick damage. This, however, is not. Same goes for Endless Hail as well. This is damage over time, as it does damage every 1 second. And it's ground-based. So what did you learn about the last ability? You have a range set in your skills. If it says ground, it's wherever it lands. And if it has a duration, it is over time. And as you can see, different types of numbers. Damage over time should show in this manner. So you've got your orange numbers there, ticking on the body of the target. If they leave the area, the dot is not on them anymore. But some abilities do stay with the target. So when we have dual wield here and we go into this particular ability, Blood Craze, here's another example. This has 2 bonuses to it. The target is the enemy, which we know affects the target. Just like Blast Bones does. It affects the enemy. But it does an initial direct attack. Then continues to be a damage over time. So when you're speccing into damage types, this is both. Now, where volley can be fired and it only affects the targets inside the area, this doesn't hit anybody. But if it's here, it will. Now let's just imagine they moved out of it. No more damage on them. This, however, instant hit and then a damage over time. You see the numbers coming up on his body? Damage over time. There are certain restrictions or alterations to stuff like that. Soul Trap, damage over time. Poison Injection, initial hit and damage over time. Rend and Slashes, initial hit and damage over time. Spin to win, just direct. Now, are you a dot build? Are you an Error of Effect build? Are you a direct damage build? Are you single target direct damage, single target dot, single target a balance of the two, single target direct damage with Error of Effect damage over time? You can see where this can stem out of control. And that is deliberately put into the game as a way to choose how to make your character. Sure, you can put a set amount of skills on your bar and decide that you like them all and use them, but knowing what types of damage they are allows you to then hone in on the bonuses for your particular character, and you can build your sets around it. So, as an example, we'll go into sets now. We've seen the damage over time, we've seen the direct stuff, we've seen how different target rules apply. Now, I don't want to keep repeating myself too much, but I do want to make sure this is very, very clear. When you're looking at the skills, they do have titles and conditions, if you like, which you should pay attention to. So, cast time, first of all, is it channeled or instant? Target, is it the enemy? Is it the area in which it's in or where it's cast from? Is it from you? Is it in front of you? There are ground-based stuff, so target tells you how to apply it or how it is affecting combat. Range is from where you can cast it from at maximum. Duration is the length of duration the ability runs for. So this particular one, Blast Bones, can actually run for 8 seconds. Anything after that, it disappears. This damage over time lasts for 10 seconds, and then you either reapply it or it runs off. And you can kind of start it again before it runs out, or you can let it go out completely. This doesn't have one. So then you've got to look at the radius, obviously, from wherever the target is being affected. So remember, cone, Error of Effect from you, Error Effect from the target exploding or whatever it does. There's lots of different conditions that you need to pay attention to. Now, the way to notice whether it's direct damage, again, is very simple. Look above their heads. That's direct damage. You can see the damage above their heads. Look on his body. That's damage over time. Now, just a quick one. There are some exceptions to this rule, and this is for a very good reason, although it's not necessarily that common to understand it. So, there are obviously situations where damage over time, there's the orange numbers, which is great, we figured that out. And of course, the direct damage is the white numbers, or yellow if they crit, above the head of the target. However, there are some, we'll call them hybrid variations, where it will do damage over time, but it will put the numbers above the head, the white and the yellow for the crit. Now, this is a rule for very specific skill types in the game, and it's based upon defense. So, although generally damage over time is shown in orange and direct is shown in white or yellow if it crits, it's actually for the purpose of defense. So if something is connected to you or something is damage over time, you cannot avoid it. But if something is direct, you can block it or dodge it for the most part. This type of damage that is damage over time and channeled and doing damage over their head, the damage can be blocked and the skill can be interrupted. Now, the lightning damage from the channeled effect follows the damage over time. So it can obviously attach to the target and you can't dodge it. But it can be blocked and it can obviously be mitigated. So there are exceptions. So lightning heavy attack, resto heavy attack, these are abilities that can't be interrupted but can be blocked via their damage, but can't be dodged. So they do still show damage over time, but the pop at the end can be defended against in a more easy to be defended manner, if you like. You can dodge roll the end pop. But the Jesus Beam does do damage over time, and someone can run up and bash you and stop it. Someone can't run up and bash you and stop this ability. That's either get out of my face or you're dead. This one can be interacted with. So again, just to make that clear, some very specific skills do cross over into both, but above all, those numbers are basically, can you avoid it and can you not? For the most part though, about 95% of the game, orange is damage over time and white or yellow is direct. Now, we're going to look at gear quickly. This isn't how to make builds as such. I mean, we've got many more episodes coming, but this is something you should pay attention to. So, we have, for example, on us at the moment, we have Briarheart. This has a crit bonus. This has stamina. This has crit again, so crit chance, which is nice. When you deal critical damage, you have a 10% chance to increase your weapon damage. Now, that is not based on a type of damage condition. That's just whether you crit or not. If you do crit, you have a chance to proc this. If you don't crit, you won't. That is basically combat numbers being lucky. That doesn't need to be direct damage. It doesn't need to be damage over time. It doesn't need to be area of effect or anything like that. It just has to be damage and get a crit. So that's based on luck. Then, when you have stuff like this, Stormfist, this is when you deal damage. So any damage. It doesn't have to be direct, dot, or AoE. It's anything, and it will affect the target. Now, here's a prime example of damage types affecting things. You can do basic damage, you can do crit damage. That's not what we're really going into today. They do have conditions. There's also melee damage or certain elemental type of damage, which we'll go into in another video. But we're just going to go over dots, direct, and AoE. And this is a prime example of that. As long as I have the shoulders on me, I do. Now, this is Valken Scoria. Some of you may have seen it before. It's actually one of, if not the coolest monster set in the game. Whether it's the best or not is not the point. There is no best in this game, essentially, anyway. It depends on what works for you and what works for you towards your build or situation. But this is, honestly, one of the coolest. But the condition to firing this is when you deal damage with a damage over time effect, you have an 8% chance to summon a meteor, basically, out of the sky, and it lands and goes boom. Now, why is this video important? Why do you need to know what damage types you have? None of this will fire it. The poison injection, the initial hit won't, but the dot will, if you're lucky. So if you stack your dots, here comes the meteor. That will only fire if there is damage over time applied. Let's put another one on this dude. Leave these running. See the difference? If I just hit this guy over and over and over, it's never, ever going to come out. You hit the other one, he's still dotted. Won't hit him. So, that's a very quick, yet valid example of how to choose what you should and shouldn't use for your character's design. So, stuff like this fires off of everything. Stuff like this fires off of damage over time. There are other things that only fire off of direct damage. You have to make sure you've, of course, got an abundance of it to make it fire. Some 5-piece sets are inside this kind of category as well. And this also makes a difference when you're deciding what weapons to use, what champion points, and all that good stuff. Now, we're not going to go into champion points as such today, but I will briefly note that regardless of whether you're doing physical, magic, fire, ice, whatever, doesn't matter. You've got trees here, the blue ones specifically, that work towards different element types, different damage types, which is something we're going to go into on another day. But above all, your damage over time and your direct. Now, your light attacks depend on your weapon, and your heavy attacks do as well. Depending on the type of heavy attack, they may go into Master at Arms and balance off the two, because they could be direct. Some of them are. Others may be channeled, which means channeled abilities go into here. So here's your damage over time in your champion points. Here's your flat direct damage, which contributes towards your single target and area of effect direct damage. So we're not going to go, again, like I said, too much into champion points, but these are the two areas you want to pay attention to. Some builds require a balance. Some builds require more of one than the other. And some might not need any. It might be a tank. Who knows? It's about choice at the end of the day. But your choices start with you understanding what you're actually choosing. So again, one more time to recap. Pay attention to your cast time for your choices of skills. Pay attention to how the ability goes off, where it goes off. Is it you, the enemy, or the ground? Pay attention to your range. Pay attention to the area of effect if it has it. And of course, the duration of its damage over time, because you don't want these to really run off. And if it's just direct, keep up your resources, because you are going to struggle spamming these. So, hopefully that wasn't too confusing. Hopefully that helped. Hopefully you got something from this. The next video is probably going to help a little bit more towards this. This is a very basic way to look at skills in general. But it is also very important. So, just remember when you're checking your sets, 5-piece bonuses and all that good stuff, does it work for you based on what you have available? Anyway, thank you very much for watching. I hugely appreciate the support. If you are not subscribing already, please do hit that button. It is free. Don't forget to hit that notification bell as well so you know when I upload videos. Also, don't forget, if you would like to support the channel outside of YouTube, there are some links in the info section below for Patreon, Twitter, Facebook, and of course the website XynodeGaming.com, where all the written guides are as well. So, once again, thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye-bye.